I saw them fall. Young boys I knew by name, falling like stones into flames, and I could do nothing but watch and weep. These were the words Giovanni Bosco whispered to his closest confidant the morning after, his hands still trembling, his face drained of color. The night was still dark when his screams had pierced through the corridors of the oratory in Turin. Young boys sleeping in their beds jolted awake. They ran to his room and found their beloved father, John Bosco, sitting upright, covered in cold sweat, his eyes wide with a terror they had never seen before. What had he witnessed? What vision could reduce a man who had stared down poverty, violence, and death itself to this state of trembling horror? This is the story of the dream that changed everything. A warning from beyond, a glimpse into the abyss. Giovanni Bosco was not an ordinary priest. By 1868, he had already become a legend in the streets of Turin. The orphan boys, the street children, the abandoned youth that society had thrown away, he gathered them, educated them, loved them. He built schools, workshops, churches. He fought for them with a father's fierce devotion. But there was something else about Don Bosco that set him apart. He had dreams. Not ordinary dreams, but visions so vivid, so precise, that they bordered on prophecy. According to his biographers, particularly Father Giovanni Battista Lemoyne, who documented his life meticulously, Don Bosco experienced over 150 prophetic dreams throughout his lifetime. He predicted deaths, conversions, dangers. He saw the future of his congregation, the faces of boys who would become priests, the obstacles that would come. The church took his dreams seriously. His Salesian brothers recorded them carefully. Many were verified by events that followed. When Don Bosco said he had seen something in a dream, people listened. So when he woke up screaming that night, when he refused to speak about it for hours, when his face remained pale through morning prayers, everyone knew something terrible had been revealed to him. The year was likely 1868, though some accounts place it earlier. Don Bosco had been particularly worried about several of his boys. They were drifting. Good boys, many of them, but temptation was strong in the industrial city of Turin. The world was changing fast. Old certainties were crumbling. New philosophies were spreading: materialism, secularism, the idea that maybe there was no heaven, no hell, no eternal consequence to how we live. Some of his students were listening to these voices. Don Bosco could see it, the way they attended Mass with distracted eyes, the way they dismissed his warnings with teenage confidence. "Times are different now, Father," they would say. "Those old stories about judgment and damnation, they're just tools to control us." He had gone to bed that night carrying their faces in his heart, praying for a way to reach them. What happened next would haunt him for the rest of his life. The dream began gently, almost peacefully. He found himself standing in a courtyard, similar to the oratory but larger, bathed in an unusual light, not quite daylight, not quite darkness. Before him stretched a road, wide at first, comfortable. His boys were there, all of them, hundreds of young faces he recognized. They were walking along the road, talking, laughing, some pushing each other playfully. He called out to them. They waved back but didn't stop. They kept walking. The road began to narrow, slowly at first, then more dramatically. The comfortable width became constrained. The boys had to walk in twos, then single file. But they didn't seem concerned. They chatted on, confident in their stride. And then he saw it. The road ended, not gradually, not with warning signs or barriers. It ended abruptly at a cliff edge, dropping into an abyss so deep, so dark, that looking into it made his soul recoil. But the boys couldn't see it. Or they could see it but didn't believe it was real. They walked forward, one after another, and when they reached the edge, they simply fell. Not with surprise, not with screams. They fell with an awful, silent inevitability, like stones dropping into a well. Don Bosco tried to run forward, tried to shout warnings. His voice came out as a whisper. His legs wouldn't move. He could only watch as boy after boy disappeared over the edge. And then the abyss opened. What he saw next left him shaking for days. The abyss wasn't empty. Flames rose, not earthly fire, but consuming darkness that burned without end. The light revealed only shadows upon shadows. Then the sounds, voices, countless voices screaming, weeping, calling for help that would never come. Worse than the screaming was the silence between suffocating, absolute abandonment. Heat radiated upward, not physical but spiritual, burning the soul itself. He wanted to flee, to close his eyes, to wake up, but he couldn't look away. Because now he could see them. Souls. Human souls twisted in agony, writhing in torment without end. They clawed at the flames, finding no relief. And the worst part, the detail that would break him utterly, was that he recognized their faces. He saw Marco, 17, with bright eyes and quick smile. Marco, who had stopped confession 6 months ago, who laughed at warnings about purity. "Father, you're old-fashioned. These things aren't sins anymore." Now Marco's bright eyes were windows to infinite regret. Giuseppe, barely 16, caught stealing but refusing restitution, hardening his heart with pride. "I don't need forgiveness." Don Bosco had pleaded for hours. Giuseppe had chosen differently. Now he burned. Antonio, who had abandoned faith entirely, who mocked the sacraments, called the Eucharist just bread. "When we die, we just stop existing. There is no judgment, no hell." Antonio had discovered his mistake. Too late. Forever too late. One after another, Don Bosco saw faces he knew. Boys he had taught, boys he had fed, boys he had clothed and sheltered and loved like a father. They were there, in that place, in that fire, in that absolute, irrevocable, eternal separation from God. The flames were not punishment imposed from outside. They were the natural consequence of choices made, hearts hardened, grace rejected. These boys had chosen to walk away from God, step by step, sin by sin, refusal by refusal. And God, respecting their freedom, had let them go. The abyss was simply where that road ended. Don Bosco tried to reach them, tried to extend his hand, but an invisible barrier separated him from them. He could see them, hear them, recognize their agony, but he could not help them, not anymore. The time for help had passed. The moment of choice had closed. Mercy had been available, abundant, pleading with them to return. They had said no, and in eternity, no means forever. The sound that came from Don Bosco's throat was not quite human. It was the sound of a father watching his children burn, powerless to save them. It was grief beyond words, horror beyond description. He screamed with everything in him, a scream that tore through the vision and pulled him back into his own room, into his own bed, into the cold darkness of a winter night in Turin. But he could still see their faces, still hear their cries. The young Salesians who ran to his room found him sitting upright, tears streaming down his face, his whole body shaking. He couldn't speak for several minutes. When he finally found words, all he could say was, "Pray. We must pray. We must pray now." For 3 days, he barely ate. He moved through the oratory like a man haunted, stopping suddenly in corridors as if hearing something no one else could hear. At meals, he would look at the boys gathered around him, and his eyes would fill with tears. On the 4th day, he gathered all his students in the chapel. What he told them was recorded by several witnesses. He didn't give them names. He didn't point fingers. But he described what he had seen with such vivid, terrible detail that the entire chapel fell into stunned silence. Strong boys wept. Skeptical boys turned pale. The ones who had been drifting, who had been playing with sin like it was a game, who had dismissed eternal consequences as old-fashioned fear-mongering, they understood, perhaps for the first time, that hell was not a metaphor. It was real as the ground they stood on, as real as the choices they made every single day. Don Bosco knew it wasn't destiny he had seen. It was mercy shown through terror. The dream wasn't a prophecy of what would happen, but a warning of what could, a chance for his boys to wake up before it was too late. And many did. In the days that followed, confessions filled the oratory. Tears, repentance, reconciliation. The boys who had mocked sin began to tremble at its cost. The dream had done what sermons never could. Not all returned. Some hearts stayed cold. But those who listened changed forever. They understood that hell is not a story, it's a possibility. And that mercy, even when it terrifies, is still love calling the soul home. And what about us? This wasn't just a warning for the boys of Turin. The same pride, impurity, and disbelief still lead souls to the edge today. Saints like Teresa, Faustina, and John Bosco didn't invent these visions to frighten us. They saw what waits beyond the veil, not symbols, but reality. Hell isn't a place God sends us to. It's the place we choose when we tell Him, again and again, "Leave me alone." And with sorrow deeper than we can imagine, He allows it. Sin begins as a whisper, a compromise, a single step away from the light, then another, and another, until the road ends just as John Bosco saw at the edge of the abyss. The question is not whether hell exists. The question is whether we will see the edge before we fall. John Bosco's warning was simple. Wake up before it's too late. Heaven isn't a prize for the good. It's union with God Himself. And hell is not a sentence, it's the choice to live without Him forever. Yet mercy is still open. As long as breath remains, the door has not closed. No sin is too great. No soul too far gone. That's why John Bosco didn't leave his boys in fear. He led them to confession, to prayer, to the mercy waiting in silence. If you've wandered far from God, this is your dream, your warning. The path may be narrowing, but there is still time to turn back. And if someone you love is walking toward the edge, pray for them. Show them the abyss, not to frighten, but to save. Remember the image, the boys falling like stones into darkness. In the dream, John Bosco couldn't save them. In life, he could. And he did. This isn't a story about fear. It's a story about love. A love so fierce it will show us horror to save us from it. Take a moment of silence. Pray for someone who has drifted far from God. If this stirred your soul, don't wait. Turn back now. The dream was their warning. This is yours. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to remember that grace is still possible. Pray for the living, pray for the lost, and pray for those who no longer pray at all. Because eternity is not far away, and it is a long time to regret our choices.